Alright guys, so I got a confession to make. I went wheeling, but I didn't get a whole lot of video. Very little bit actually. Jeep did great as a first trip with a lot of new stuff. My Super Duties, my 1-tons, my 43s, my doubler. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I got to test out on this trip. And what failed was my Dana 60. So let me show you that. U-joint busted. Not exactly sure when it happened. Never heard it pop or anything like that. All of a sudden, we just weren't climbing anymore. Hopped out and found the busted U-joint. Ripped off the ears of the both shafts, the yoke. It looks like I got my Zerk fitting up here too, so I need to see if I need to replace that bolt joint or if I can extract that. So I'm going to dig into this. Upgrade while I'm at it. That uses the 1480 U-joints. And actually over here is the new upgrade. Came off of a F450, a 550, which has the 1550 U-joints, bigger yoke, so hopefully that won't happen again. Fairly reasonably priced at $180 for these, so when you consider a new U-joint's about 50 bucks. So these are already pressed in together, and it's supposed to be a direct swap, so I'm gonna pop those in there. And I got one more confession. Changed out the axle shafts off the screen. So already swapped that out. This old one, of course. New one is in. So the broken passenger side is finished now. So you got my Zerk fitting back in. That was a pain. Just barely clears if you look at that. So much beefier yoke on these. So now that I've done it on one side, figured out all the pitfalls and hurdles to come over, I'm going to film this one. So this will make it a little bit more streamlined. You can see the difference between the two yokes, the before and the after over there. So anyways, let's dive into this. I've already got the tire off. Let's pull the brake. So after you get the tire off, next thing we need to do is take off the brake assembly. So caliper and bracket. I go ahead and I pull the caliper bolt out, loosen this bottom one here, and then that leaves me a little bit of room to pivot this assembly so I can get to these other bolts. So there's the lower bracket bolts, and then this upper one, like I said, you pivot that because it's in the way of this hard line, and not quite enough room with the extension. Now that'll come off. Bracket and caliper comes out of the way. Support it somewhere. I got my tire here, so I'm gonna set it on that. Rotor comes off. Now we can get to pulling this up assembly. A couple Torx bits. Break those free. In this case, I am ditching the stock Ford hub assemblies. I'm gonna go to some drive flanges, drive slugs. Got most of it already installed on the other side. However, they sent me the wrong spacer for the hub, so I'll go over that once I get to that point. But so like I said, while I'm in here, I'm gonna go ahead and upgrade. This is a dedicated 4-wheel drive vehicle. It's not gonna see any street time. I'm gonna put those slugs in it so that way I don't have one less thing to fail. Beefs it up. So that's free now. Might need something to tap on to loosen it up. There we go. Got a little bit of movement. Someone's trying to come here. There we go. Greasy goodness. And then I usually just take a bag, put it in there to keep the dirt and everything else off of it. Might hold on to those as a spare, but you know, it's stored now and I don't have to worry about the grease or anything like that. Now, you can see in there, there's a snap ring way back there in the back. Standard reversible snap ring pliers will not pull that, not long enough, and then it gets in the way here, so I've got some special pliers. They're not really special, they're just single purpose. Got them off Amazon. They work pretty good for it, so we'll pull that. And then the unit bearing and the stub shaft will be separate. Well, separate from each other. Still need to pull the 4 bolts off the back of the unit bearing. So now you got to try to fish that out. Try to snag, get both of those eyelets lined up. There we go. And there's our ring. So, and there's the pliers that I'm using too. Snap ring and store it, because we're going to need that later. So next up we need to pull these bolts over here. Then you got two down here as well too. There's one way over there. That is what's going to release this hub bearing assembly, unit bearing assembly from the knuckle. So there's the other end of the threaded parts. Sometimes I've seen where the bolts will come out all together, this whole stud. Sometimes you'll get just the nuts to come off. So we'll see what happens with these. So at this point I've got them all to where they're hand tight. So this one came out as a stud. Actually, I removed 3 studs on this side, 1 nut. On the other side, it was the opposite. I had 3 nuts that came off 1 stud. So like I said, it depends on how they're seated. So I've got the 2 bottom ones on still. All that's really holding it on is the O-ring in between the knuckle and the bearing assembly. So I leave the 2 bottom ones on so I can, you know, tap on it a little bit to get that to separate. Like I said, it is that O-ring holding it in. You can see how that gap's coming apart a little bit. So now I can get something in there to pry it free and do the same thing to the other side. Get that to pop out, and that'll separate it. There we go. So see, like I said, just leave that in there. Come to the other side, couple taps. Loosen it all the way. See, that one, just the nut came off. Now get in here with the pry bar. Pull the bearing assembly. Put that to the side. So now once that wheel bearing assembly is out of the way, this is what you got to overcome. So that seal, that vacuum seal, is what's holding this inner shaft, or this whole shaft assembly in there. That you've got a dust seal here, and then you've got the inner axle seal back there by the differential, the carrier. But mainly is this vacuum seal that you got to overcome. So what I found may not work perfectly, but if you can see that edge of the yoke right there, put my pry bar on it, press against it, you can see some movement on it, and then see if that will pull out. See some movement on it. So might be a combination of prying here and then beating on the inside of that seal, but we've got to get that out of the way. So let me give it one more pry. Might have to do this off camera. Ooh, we got some movement. Let's see if we can give it a little bit more love. That did it. And presto, she's gone. So there's the 2 shafts side by side. Put a tape measure on them. Yokes look to be about a ½ inch wider on the new ones. A little bit more meat around the ear itself too, around the U-joint, so that should hold up better. Shafts are identical. These are still stock 35 spline shafts. So next up is to reinstall. So first thing, you want to yank that seal out. So yeah, this would be sitting right here. That's your dust seal. Just get you a pry bar, pop that guy out, which is done. Discard. I put a paper towel in there to absorb some oil. That needs to come out. It still looks pretty fresh. I'm going to use some of this to kind of lubricate the surface. So there we go. Got some oil on that. The Spicer kit that I had came with replacement seals. So that'll go right there. And then I'll get a extension and a socket and just press that back into place. No, I said press, but I actually meant tap. So, we'll tap, tap, taparoo. Again, this is just a dust seal to keep all the sand and debris and everything else out. So, and now it's pressed in, or beat in rather. Next up, we'll lubricate the surface here where the axle shaft's going to ride. Put a little bit around here, and then we're going to insert that in. Alright, now slide that in there. Careful to lift it up so that way you do hit the inner seal. Alright, there we go. Wasn't dragging on it. Now, get the splines engaged. Now this is the next chore. This is when you have to press that vacuum seal in. And by press, I mean beat. So I've got the tool that goes right here. And now you beat until this lip is flush with that surface right there. So it's got to go in that far. Toyed with the idea of not putting this seal on, just to make it easier for trail repairs and whatnot. If it does have to come out and get replaced again, it probably will not go back on. So I'm not utilizing the vacuum seal anyways, because these are, again, going to be drive slugs, or even if you have manual hubs, if you're not using the auto feature, it really doesn't benefit you that much, other than keeping the dirt out. So, new one is in. Now, time to force that on. And start wailing away. Alright. You can see it's flush now. So seal is in place. Now that the shaft's back in, we'll put the unit bearing assembly back in. Alright. That's on. Now I need to put the bolts back in. Remember, there is an O-ring seal in between here, so I put a little bit of grease on it to help lubricate it, help it slide in a little bit easier. We'll bolt that in, and now it's pretty much everything in reverse. The only thing different, like I said, I'm going to do is put in that slug. So instead of that hub assembly, you'll just slide that slug in instead. Still needs the snap ring, so I'll have to put that on. So let me go ahead and bolt that up. Alright, fully torqued. Next up, time to put the snap ring back in. Now you can see the eyes. And I like to use a flat blade, make sure that it gets set in that little channel. So lastly, all I got to do now is reassemble the brake assembly, put the tire back on, and then my slug. So remember, I'm doing away with my hubs and putting this drive slug in, so that will just slide into place. I need to rotate it a little bit to make sure that the inner and outer splines line up. So now you can see in place, I've got the two threaded holes there for extracting. Throw those in and then you can pull it out. And then the spacer goes in, holds that against the plate, which would go right here. So, however, mine doesn't close all the way. I'm waiting on another part. They sent me the wrong spacer. This one is too long. So if you do encounter that problem, I contacted East Coast Gear Supply. They said, oh, it must have been repackaged wrong. So they're sending me another spacer, so that'll bolt up. And literally that is it. You pull out the hub, you put the slug in, put the spacer, put the flange or the mount on, and then thread that into place, and you're done. So that'd be it. Like I said, I'm gonna button it up. You guys another routine. Just reassemble everything the way it came apart, and you are good to go. See you guys.